It is beautiful to die on the front line as a brave man fighting for his country. This is how the poet Tyrtaeus described Greece's most feared soldiers. A legendary group of courageous warriors who were raised from infancy to fight to the death in protection of their country, and whose legacy has inspired countless myths and tales throughout history. For them, surrender was not an option, as they would rather die in battle honorably before showing any ounce of weakness. They were the incarnate wrath of the gods, the Spartans. From there emerges the saga of a monarch whose leadership galvanized the 300 most valorous Spartans ever known, standing defiant against the vast might of the Persian Empire to safeguard the very cradle of Western civilization from the spectre of conquest. A hero, a legend and a luminary in Greece's ancient history, his name is Leonidas I. Born around 540 BCE in the martial city of Sparta, Leonidas was the progeny of Anaxandridas II, and thus the scion of a lineage as formidable as the Lion of Sparta himself. He was also considered to be a descendant of the legendary Heracles, a figure of immense strength and heroic virtue according to Greek mythology. In an era when Greece was a tapestry of competing city-states, Athens was a democratic state where education, art and philosophy were valued, while Sparta was a military state where strength, size and fighting capabilities were most important. Leonidas was sculpted by the very essence of Spartan excellence. His life was meant to serve as an example of bravery and selflessness in the face of insurmountable odds. Military duty was required from an early age throughout all of Greece, but for the Spartans, who considered combat to be the highest form of consecration, it meant much more than that. In Spartan society, it was much better to die in battle than to return home defeated. At the age of 7, Spartan boys were forced to leave their households and taken to the agoge, a harsh training facility where they learned military tactics, hunting, athletics and scholastics. The only exception to this rule was the king's firstborn, who would receive a specialized education in the fulfillment of his future responsibilities as king. However, this was not the case with Leonidas. As the third son of Anaxandridas, his brother Cleomedes was the first in line to inherit the throne. Therefore, he had to spend his childhood in the agoge. He gained knowledge of Spartan culture, weapon handling techniques, and most importantly, how to submit to his captain. In addition, he was also taught to withstand the most challenging circumstances, such as starvation, wilderness survival, simultaneous enemy attacks, and all sorts of subpar living conditions. By the time he reached his early adulthood, Leonidas was a formidable fighter and strategist who could hold his own against the most elite Spartan warriors. He quickly wed Gorgo, daughter of his brother Cleomedes, who was renowned for her immense political astuteness and political preparation, in addition to her stunning beauty. A perfect match for Leonidas because women at Sparta enjoyed more freedom than in any other Greek city-state. To produce strong children, a warrior needed a strong life partner. Leonidas had 2 older brothers, therefore it didn't seem plausible that he would become one of the 2 Spartan kings and represent the royal house of the Aegiadas. But he carried it out following Dorieus' death during a war in Sicily and the enigmatic death of Cleomenes in his cell following his banishment and imprisonment due to his tyrannical and insane behavior, which left him without an heir. So Leonidas ascended to the throne in 490 BC. At the same time, the Persian Empire had grown stronger. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen, thus conquering Greece was considered the next logical step in expanding the empire's borders. Control over its lands would not only extend Persian territory, but also secure vital trade routes and assert Persian dominance over the Aegean Sea. Every Greek city received messages from Persia pleading with them to submit to the unstoppable empire. Due to the great power of the empire, some cities submitted, but Athens and Sparta even went so far as to toss them down a well in defiance of the offensive request. Persian forces started to advance and attack the cities that refused to submit. The man responsible for this invasion was Xerxes I, son of Darius I, and who is portrayed as a degenerate, excessive slave-owning king who was completely in conflict with Athenian democracy. A mad titan who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The Gerigian cities that were threatened began to schedule meetings with each other to be able to resist the Persian war muscle, but of all of them, less than 30% agreed to fight together to confront Xerxes and his soldiers. Greece's army lacked both coherence and size, yet within their ranks stood Leonidas, a figure whose very essence was imbued with the virtues essential for steering the fragile coalition of city-states against the formidable tide of Persia. Interestingly, a dire prophecy that originated in Delphi and travelled throughout Greece reached the Spartan council, stating, "If the life of a king is not given in exchange for protection, Sparta will be reduced to ashes." Keeping his soldiers and naval force as close together as possible, Xerxes continued his relentless approach, and before they knew it, he had already invaded Thessaly and Macedonia. The Greek populace was already advancing on Thermopylae as the invincible Persian army approached, imploring the other city-states to cease hostilities and submit. Leonidas's goal of creating a unified and formidable force was far from complete, and victory would need more than fighting to the death. Despite Greece's overwhelming military might, they could stall their advances temporarily if they could lower Persian morale. This would give them time to plan further and complete the formation of the Greek army that would confront Xerxes. The Spartans, however, remained steadfast in their decision, believing that they would have to seize the territorial advantage as much as possible if they were going to make such a sacrifice in order to buy the rest of Greece some time. Leonidas consented to take a small fleet of his bravest soldiers, as taking them all at once would leave Athens and other cities defenseless. Knowing full well that they would never return, these men went on to become the greatest 300 Spartans in history. The 300 fighters who engaged in combat at the very gates of hell. For his elite men, the best of the best, 300 was the ideal number. The goal of the operation was to elicit a psychological counterattack. Therefore, the fewer men engaged in battle, the higher the achievement and the number of martyrs that would result from it. They were joined by 3,000 Peloponnesians and less than 1,000 non-combatant helots, in addition to the 300 Spartans. However, out of all of them, there were just 300 Spartans who were mentally prepared to fight until they achieved the most honorable demise imaginable, to the extent that every soldier had to have a son who was still alive and responsible for taking on his father's duties at some point. In the pass, close to the sea, the Persians set up camp on a plain. Nonetheless, there were places on the route that were little wider than 2 meters, separating their tent from the mountains. In order to strengthen their position, the Spartans made the decision to construct a wall. The Persians knew the tactic, but it defied common sense that a small number of soldiers could take on the might of the Persian military. It is reported that Xerxes sent Leonidas a plea to surrender your weapons prior to the initial attack, to which he responded, "Come and get them." Xerxes began with a command of slightly more than 2,000 men, but the Spartans did not allow themselves to be hurt. By taking advantage of the battlefield's small width, they quickly reduced the 2,000 Persian soldiers to nothing. The techniques employed went well beyond just hurling men at the Spartans in an attempt to overpower them. Xerxes employed his archers to cover the sun with arrows, but the Spartan shields prevented every aerial attack. Xerxes lost his temper numerous times at the increasingly unbelievable deeds of the 300 Spartans. The Persian army suffered losses that were many times greater than those anticipated in order to topple such a small number, indicating that the Spartan efforts were successful. The air splattered Persian blood throughout the battlefield following each subsequent assault by the conquerors. The psychological impact had worked well. 300 men caused the world's most powerful fleet to re-evaluate if their goals were still worthwhile. Xerxes was worried about what was happening, so he sent his best soldiers because he felt he had no other choice. These top fighters, called the Immortals, were the elite force of the vast Persian army. They were called this because there were always 10,000 of them. If one was lost, another would take his place, so their numbers stayed the same. They were the most dangerous force Xerxes used against the defenders at the hot gates. But even with all their strength, they couldn't beat the 300 soldiers they faced, no matter how hard they tried. After more than 20,000 Persians were defeated and the tide began to turn in favor of the Spartans, a cowardly soldier named Ephialtes chose to betray Leonidas by helping Xerxes find an alternative route to encircle the Greek warriors at Thermopylae in the hopes of getting rewarded by the Persian king. The element of surprise put the Greek resistance in mortal danger in the course of one night. At that point, Leonidas took a decision befitting the most valiant Spartan warrior. He informed the other soldiers that they were not Spartans and that they should retreat since their towns would require them. Raised in the Agoge, those 300 warriors were prepared to carry out the prophecy that required the life of a king in exchange for the Greek victory. The Spartans fought their way to the end. They'd been taken aback, but their newfound height gave them the opportunity to take nearly as many lives in a single day as they had in the previous two. They all put up a lot of effort fighting beside King Leonidas. He battled valiantly until his wounds started to weaken him. His arm wounds prevented him from using his sword, yet he continued to terrorize the Persians with his mouth and nails. Leonidas eventually lost too much blood and fell. The Spartans fought valiantly to protect their king's body when the Persians attempted to drag him away after seeing it. The conflict remained a slaughterhouse of Persian and Spartan warriors until a final hail of arrows finished off the remaining Spartans. Xerxes' frustration was reflected in his treatment of his deceased enemy. He beheaded and crucified Leonidas in a show of disdain, intending to terrorize and demoralize the Greek states. However, the acts of savagery committed against Leonidas's corpse failed to suffocate the sparks of bravery and solidarity that his sacrifice had ignited across Greece. In fact, it only served to rekindle the Greek spirit. The Greek city-states were able to come together at this crucial moment, turning their sadness into strength and their desperation into determination. During this time, Athens strengthened its naval fleet in response to the growing urgency of the situation and launched a fresh, well-planned attack on the Persian forces' center. After the Battle of Thermopylae, the Persians were drawn into a long-lasting conflict with a newly united Greek resistance rather than capturing the Gyrigian plains. The idea of a collective Greek identity was built on the foundation of Leonidas's ultimate sacrifice. Absurd city-states united in the face of misfortune, putting aside their political and cultural divisions to confront a shared foe. The next year of fighting was characterized by a string of unrelenting battles that mirrored the determination and perseverance shown at Thermopylae. The culmination of this cohesion and tenacity was the drive of Persian forces out of the Hellenic realm, demonstrating the potency of both group resilience and strategic acumen. Following these historic conflicts, there was a period of introspection and grief. The names of the 300 Spartans who had given their lives in defense of Greece's freedom were engraved along with the ashes of the fallen. Their sacrifice went beyond a simple act of combat and came to represent bravery, selflessness, and the resilient spirit of a people banded together to oppose oppression. They not only saved their country, but also established the groundwork for a magnificent period of democracy, philosophy, and culture, thanks to their bravery. The idea of Greece as a nation united by common ideals and destiny emerged in the wake of their bravery. King Leonidas and his Spartans in their death achieved an immortality that no victor's laurels could bestow, inspiring generations long after the din of battle had faded into silence.